If you watched my last video about slowing down and rural living, you will know that I purchased a film camera from the 1970s, a fully manual Canon camera. The purpose of this camera was to really help me slow down and become more thoughtful of my shots. So what I have today in front of me is the Canon FTB QL. This is a fully manual vintage camera from the 1970s. The only electronics in it is for the metering. Otherwise, there is nothing that can go wrong with this camera. The only thing that could go wrong with it is if this camera was ever improperly stored and it had a lot of dust, fungus, rust, or anything like that. Other than that, this camera will never fail you, unlike your electronic cameras today. I also got 3 lenses that I bought with it. I have the 35 to 70. This lens right here is a zoom lens. It's an f4. Everything feels nice and smooth on it. It does feel like a little bit of a drag, but it's not bad. Focusing is nice and smooth. The aperture ring is nice and smooth. This is the 50 millimeter FL lens that came with it. Again, everything is optically clean like all the other lenses I have here. No scratches, no dust, no fungus, no haze. Everything is all smooth operating. And then also I have the 28 millimeter. So this is a 2.8. This one here, the 50 is a 1.8, and then this one here is an f4. Now, I've already started playing around with this camera and testing all the functions. So everything on here seems to work. The shutter executes, the dials all turn nice, the timer on it works. You can stop it down for the FL lenses if you're not using the FD. The advanced button works. Oh, I just love the sound of vintage cameras. This also has a lock on it so that you cannot accidentally hit the shutter, and you also cannot accidentally advance your film once it's in the locked position. So I'm here in Walmart, and it seems like the biggest trend lately is instant cameras, Instamax. Looks like Polaroid's coming back. They got a lot in stock for that, but no 35 millimeter film to be found anywhere. I bought this camera off of eBay. The seller that I bought it from had it listed as a fully new refurbished camera. So basically he had went through this entire camera and refurbished it. It does look brand new with the exception of some surface like scuff marks right here, but it's totally clean, dust free. Everything inside looks good. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but the mirror does have a little bit like what happens to old mirrors on the edging, but it does not seem to actually affect when you're looking through the viewfinder. So it was listed that you could return it if you had any problems. I think there's like a 30-day return policy. It did also come with a 1-year warranty and accident policy through Allstate. So if anything happens to this camera within 1 year, it does have a warranty and accident policy. You can buy those from Allstate on stuff you buy off of eBay to protect whatever you're buying, but this camera actually came with it. So I did talk to one of the camera salesmen that I used to know when I lived down in North Carolina. He's since retired, and he told me that these Canon FTBs are built like tanks. Now, I do want to run some test film through this to make sure that it is totally working. So I went to my local CVS. Unfortunately, they did not have any single rolls. They only had the 3-pack, and then this was the last one. The other box that was there was opened, so I don't trust it because film cameras, you cannot expose film to the light, otherwise you're going to ruin the film. I did have to buy a 3-pack, which was about $30. Comes to about $10 a roll, which basically is kind of average for your cheaper film. This is color 400 speed film, which is pretty much the average you're going to find at your local drugstore, Walmart, if they still have it. In the future, I will probably end up going to a camera store that's about 30 minutes away, I believe. Oh no. My camera strap just broke. Well, I just took another picture and everything is functional. So this camera is built like a tank. That's awesome. Because digital camera, I don't think that would have survived. Well, if I'm going to test out a film camera, I got to come to the beach and also come to where they park a lot of fishing boats. Should be able to get some good pictures over here. This little one over here is for sale. Yeah, I wish my budget would let me get that, but nope, not happening. Haven't made it that big on YouTube yet. Yeah, these should make some great shots. Alrighty, just finished up the 3rd roll of film. Really like the eye cup that I added on. That makes it a lot easier for shooting with glasses on, or when I take my glasses off, since I'm left eye dominant. Now I need to send off these 3 rolls and get them developed and see what this camera actually does. So today I also took a lot of still photos and video with the phone just as a backup, just in case the camera is not working right. Before I even fully tested this camera, I started purchasing a lot of FD and NFD lenses. And the reason is these lenses are great for cinematic videography, and that's my plan, is to also get an adapter to be able to mount them to whatever mirrorless camera I get, as well as shooting film photography. So let's take a look at some of these lenses that I actually purchased. We're going to start with the camera itself, which is a little bit out of frame, but mounted to the camera right now is the 35 to 105. This is a lens that I found I used a lot during my street photography. So the next one I have here is the 28mm 2.8. This is an FL lens. Got your nifty 50. This one here is the 50mm. I believe this one's the FL as well. Yes, this is an FL that came actually with the camera. Over here I have the 135 prime. This is another 2.8. I got the 35 to 70, which is another one that I found is great for when you're doing travel or street photography. This is an f4 lens. I've got the 200mm, which is a f4 lens as well. This big boy is a 100 to 300 lens, which is zoom. Now this style zoom lens is actually the pull and push. I also have the 70 to 210, which is also a pull and push. 24mm, I found this one was heavily mounted to my camera when I was doing the street photography. So this one and the 35-70 or the 35 to 105. This one here in back is a 100mm prime. So when I was testing these different lenses, I found I was gravitating towards the 24mm, the 35 to 70, and the actual 35 to 105 for street photography. Those seem to be the focal lengths that I gravitate to a lot. The rest of these lenses, I've tried them out. I haven't really shot too much with them yet. I haven't really played around with them, but they seem to be all optically fine and everything. It's just I gotta find the right scenario to use those with. So mostly I was testing out 3 rolls of film, which is why I was doing a lot of street photography, and I also took it on one hike. Now I know I probably should have done the whole cinematic thing of showing me dropping off the film and then going into the store, putting out the photos, that I got back and looking at it. But truthfully, this last month has been totally busy. I dropped off the film in between other appointments. I picked up the film in a rush while I was out in between other things. I wanted to see how these photos looked, so I opened them up before I actually and looked at a few of them before I actually shared them with you. But I'm going to go through and share them now and show you what I found. The first thing that I want to know is when I'm looking at these pictures, I noticed that the camera is actually functioning fine. The light meter seems to be pretty accurate. There were a couple times I did not expose properly, but that's to be expected. This is the first time that I'm shooting film since late 1980s, early 1990s. This is also the first time that I'm shooting a film SLR camera, and one that is actually totally manual at that. I have shot digital and manual mode, so I kind of know exactly how to exposure and everything. But yeah, this is the first time shooting total manual film SLR, and the light meter did pretty well on it. A couple of mistakes I've made here and there had to do with probably the way I had the lens mounted, because it wasn't what they call stop down, which is a little switch up in here that makes the aperture activate properly on the NFD or the new FD lenses. But the other thing I learned is, I want to show you these pictures here. And this is something really interesting when you're shooting film. So if you take a look at these pictures here and this one here, I'll get these arranged. So what I noticed is, when I'm actually going through and loading my film, I noticed that I really should point the camera and act like I'm taking a real picture during the loading process. Because when you're loading film, what happens is, on the top of your camera, you are pushing the shutter button and then the film, and then doing the film advance lever until your shutter count actually reaches 0 or 1 depending on your camera, which mine is right here. Also, when you're advancing the film, to make sure that it's loading properly, you want to see this spinning in a counterclockwise position. So as you're going through and doing that, what I found is you're actually taking real pictures during the first few shots. So that's why on these, I didn't have the camera pointed like I was really taking pictures. And I gotta learn that while I'm loading film, to go ahead and do that so I'm not actually wasting shots. So right here is actually what you would call a proof sheet. These are all the photos that are on your negatives and on your films that you actually took. So if we take a look at the first one here, you will notice the little number right in the corner here starts with 5. That means the first 4 frames did not come out, and that's where I was actually loading the camera itself. And this one here, I actually made a mistake and opened up the back of the camera to check to make sure the film was working properly, because it wasn't advancing. So I ended up ruining the first 4 frames. So this is why this one starts at 5A. This one here, these pictures that don't look good, AA, 00A, 0A, and 1A, that's again where I was loading the film and advancing. So that's why that comes out. Looks like double hashtag A. That light leak on it may have been when I had the back door open and I was pulling the film through and I got into one of the actual exposures. And then on this one here, 00, the same thing. May have had door open or something wasn't advancing right, and I had to double check. All the way up through 3, I was snapping shots to get my shutter count at 0, so that I thought I was at the beginning of my film. And also with the snapping in these shots, I was also making sure that the film was advancing properly and the knob on the left hand side was actually turning. So when I went and got these test films developed, these test rolls, I chose not to get scans. The reason being is these are test rolls. I'm not going to be selling any of these pictures. I just wanted to see if the camera was working, and I chose only to get 5x6 pictures back, actual prints, because I was going to use them to save as memories. And that's the whole purpose of this camera anyway, is I'm looking at this camera to be more or less to capture memories that I want to save. And I also got my negatives back. You really want to get the negatives back from your lab. Choose to get your negatives, because if you do have any pictures that you might be interested in selling or further sharing or posting on Instagram or other social media, you can scan them in yourself and process them using Lightroom or your favorite photo editing software, because you want to add your own style to them. So I suggest getting your negatives back and doing scanning at some point in the future. I'm looking at getting my own scanner somewhere down the road, but for now, truthfully, the purpose of the camera is to capture my memory. So I am just happy with getting my prints back. So we're going to go through, we're going to take a quick look at these. I'm not going to go into too many details. I just want to show you what this camera caught, and I was actually, pretty happy. Like I said, some of them could have been a little bit exposed a little bit better, but I haven't shot film in a good 40 years. So let's go through, and I'm going to do these in order that I shot these rolls of film. So the first roll, I started out in the backyard and also around my local town taking pictures, and I think these really came out well. I mean, some of them have a real nostalgic feel to them. And yes, I did hold the camera in vertical mode as well to see what that would look like. I like the color rendering. This was a Fuji 400 film that I picked up at the local drugstore. Used that and then got them developed at my local camera shop. These right here, I went to do a tour down at Fort Wetherill that you saw earlier. This is some of the graffiti. I like the color rendering and how these came out as well, true to life of what it looked like over there. And I want to note that it was a really sunny day. I was shooting, if I recall correctly, it was 400 films, so I had the ASA or ISO set at 400. I had my shutter speed set at 250. I do not have a 400 setting on that, so it's either 250 or 500. And I was bouncing around between F8 and F16, sometimes even as high as F22, because it was just so bright. And then this is also when at Fort Wetherill down actually on the water. And like I said, I really like how these turned out. They have that nostalgic feeling to them of actually being vintage film, but yet they also have good color rendering. I'm really going to test out, my next film is going to be the Kodak Portrait series, either the 400 or something like that, because I want the nice gold tones of summer, and also with autumn coming up in the next month or two. May even try some black and whites. Not sure. I may pick up an additional camera body so that I have one loaded with color and one loaded with black and whites. So yeah, I'm just going through these pretty quick on this first test roll. I like how I was able to zoom in and capture that plane flying overhead. This here, I'm not exactly sure what happened with the black in this. I don't know if that was the film itself or the lens was getting dirty from being actually down at the ocean. So that was actually the first roll of a film that I shot through it, and I was really impressed with how these actually turned out. I'm really glad I'm getting back into film photography, although I will tell you it's a little bit expensive. So I paid $30 for 3 rolls of the Fuji 400 film. I also paid probably about $60, if not more, for the processing, getting prints, and getting my actual negatives back. Yeah, it's a little bit expensive of a hobby to get back into, but I don't know, I kind of like it. I think it's well worth it, and if you're going to use it more or less to capture your memories and to save your prints, I think you'll be doing yourself a favor. Alright, we're going to go through the second roll now. As you can see, I was at the ocean. It was a bright sunny day, so some of these are a little bit overexposed, even though I had my shutter speed and my aperture setting all set for that. Still like how these came out. That's actually right there, that's not a spot. That was actually a seagull flying in the distance. And you can tell that this one here, I really had trouble figuring out what exposure to use on it because it was so bright. I wanted to capture the rocks. I didn't want them totally in darkness, but yet I didn't want everything totally just like blown out because it was so bright that day. So I think this kind of came out pretty good considering how bright it was. And I know I'm not doing justice since these are not scans. I'm just flipping through the actual 5x6s on my desk. Here I tried a little bit of a slower shutter speed to actually capture some of the water. Again, this was another very bright day. In order to capture the color of the car, I had to kind of blow out the sand a little bit. But all in all, I think I did pretty well for not shooting film for about 40 years and, you know, not being sure if my light meter was accurate. That one there had a little bit of a handshake. I think what happened with this one was there was an ATV that was coming behind me as I was actually shooting this, and its loud muffler startled me as I was pressing the shutter. These are just some shots around town. Just testing out the first couple of lenses that I had before I went ahead and purchased all the other lenses. This one here was on a hike that I did, and again on the lake it was very bright. And then some of the actual in the woods areas. This one here I was testing out the macro capability of one of the lenses. I really like how that turned out. You see the detail here on the flower. Got some nice creamy bokeh in the back. And I will tell you, the bokeh on some of these lenses is a lot more creamy and a lot better than some of your modern lenses. I really liked how that turned out. I mean, that was one of the better shots that I had, probably one of my more favorite ones. And again, I was getting more into light, but you can just see how nice some of that blurry bokeh is. This one here, the exposure on it was a little bit difficult to try to meter for because we had the dark shadows in through here, but yet it was just so bright with the sun coming through. And again, same thing with this one. You know, we had bright sun up through here, but yet we had dark shadows. Now we're getting into my street walk in Providence. This is along the river. This is a river walk. Down in Providence, it was a very, very bright sunny day. There basically is no shade at all, unless there's a little bit coming off the buildings and the skyscrapers. So mostly I found myself, again, bouncing between the shutter speed of 250 and 500, bouncing again between f8, f16 for my aperture. Sometimes I even went as high as f22 or close to it just because it was so bright. But yeah, these are the getting into Providence now, and unfortunately, let me see if I can do something better here so I can show you the detail on that, because with my lights, there we go, it's a little bit better. So this picture is actually a little bit brighter than what this overhead camera is allowing me to show, and with my lights, for some reason it keeps adjusting down, but there is actually a lot more detail. Let's see if I can hold it up like that so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Looks like I may have trouble showing you some of these city shots. So what I'm going to do is, because of the way my lights and my camera's actually acting, I'm just going to hold them up like this so you can actually see more of the detail and how they actually came out. Yeah. Alright, so now we're going to get into the third roll real quick that I shot. Okay, so I'm going to go through and actually just go through these real quick here on the third roll, and if I have any that my light is actually playing with that is not showing the true representation of the exposure, I'll just go ahead and hold them up in front of me. Really liking the vintage look, especially doing the street photography in the city. Now, going on this river walk in Providence, as you can see, there is actually no shade at all, unless you get into an area where the skyscrapers are giving you some shade and allowing some shadows. But because it was so bright, I was actually shooting at f16, sometimes at f22, so depending on the shadows, I was actually bouncing between like f8 and f22 on this, and I also kept changing my ISO or ASA. Like I said, I'm shooting 400 speed film on this, but my camera does not have a 400 shutter setting that you're supposed to leave it at, so I was bouncing between 250 in the shadows and 500 in the bright light, and I kept changing my aperture as well, depending on the actual light that's coming in. So yeah, I really like how the colors and everything came out on this, how it captured the reflection. This one here was a little bit overexposed, but like I said, it was so bright that it was really hard to be able to capture the exposure properly in some of these areas. A little bit of a sun flare or lens flare right there. And again, this one here, the exposure was a little bit hard on because you had the dark shadows of the water here, but yet it was so bright where the sun was reflecting off over here. This one here, I was kind of shooting into the sun. I had no choice. The sun is actually like right up in here, just out of frame, and it was actually coming down on the roof line and actually bouncing off into the lens. So I kind of did my best because I didn't want to lose anything in the shadows, but yet I also didn't want to blow out the sky as well. It's really hard sometimes to properly expose. And again, on this one here, I had the bright sun coming through here with the river, but yet up through on either side here, I had such dark shadows from the skyscrapers, and I didn't want to lose anything in the shadows. Unfortunately, I did lose a little bit on this side because I was more trying to expose for this because I wanted to capture the bend in the river. And yes, this part of the river, the water really is that brown. And as you can see by the reflections here, how brown the water is. Again, trying to expose so I would not lose any of the shadow areas, but also with the sun reflecting down on the kayaks and off the buildings and that. So this one here is the one that I'm going to hold up and show you because the overhead camera and the light, and even at this, is showing really dark. I really wanted to capture the clouds in between the buildings and some of the buildings, but it was just so bright. These little dots right here, it was warm and humid that day, and I believe that those are either water droplets or a little bit of dust that could have been on the lens, or now that I look at it on these with the lights coming down off my desk and the overhead cam, that actually looks more like flares coming from the sun onto the lens. But it's interesting how it did that 3, but I think those are actually more lens flares than dust now that I think about it. Again, trying to expose for the shadows and how bright it is over here so that I could capture the gondolas. And this one here exposed a little bit brighter. This was a warship service on the State House steps. All the people were actually dressed in black. That was the t-shirts that they were wearing, so it was very hard to expose for this because you had the bright sunshine that was reflecting on the white state house, the white steps, and as you can see, the white sidewalk area in the front in between the red bricks, and then all the people with their black t-shirts on for the event. And this spot right here that you see, that is actually not a spot. That is actually a drone that was flying overhead. So somebody was flying a drone, and I just happened to capture that. Kind of like how this one came out of the State House in the back. Probably could have done a little bit better exposure not to get this truck, but I also want to kind of include the people walking and the bus as well, as long as the actual city scene and then the State House being right in back. Again, I really like how this looks on film. Just some more of downtown Providence. Different focal lengths. This was getting a little bit later in the afternoon. We're having some clouds come over the head, and I just really like how it brought out some of the colors in the old buildings and the way it was reflecting. The light had really gotten nice at that point. Again, here's a different focal length of that. So here's a picture of a statue that was commemorating some of the wars, and unfortunately the soldier in the statue was in complete shadow, but again you had so much brightness on the flags that I was trying to do a proper exposure for that. And I'm sorry these keep sliding out of frame on this camera overhead. Again, there's another one. So this one here was actually shot at 135 millimeter. I was zoomed all the way in on the church that was way off in the distance. And what I particularly like about this picture is the fact that the way I was able to capture it, so I did not have any of the city that's actually down below in this area and some of the chaos of a local event that was going on, that I was actually able to capture this old church so that it looks like it's on top of a hill. I kind of wished that I was able to position more so that this building was not in the frame, although it does kind of frame it pretty good to show that you are in a city setting. However, on this side, there was just so much going on that this was probably the best shot that I could take in at the time, because the amount of buildings and stuff on this side really did not do the picture justice. So I just kind of compromised and framed it this way with this in the picture. Here, not being satisfied with the shot, I did switch out the lens that I was using so that I could get, I believe here I did switch it out and went full all the way on 210 millimeter. I really like how this came out better. Let me fix this a little bit. There we go. So I really like how this one came out better, where I did not have that building on the side like I did at this one when I was at 135. Trying out the 70 to 210 was kind of a last minute decision for me. And the reason being is when you're doing street photography, unless you want to capture really up close detail, 70 to 210 is such a tight shot. You're better off using wide angle like 24 to 35 millimeter. It's really great to take a zoom lens with you from something that's like a 24 to 105 or a 35 to 105 or even a 35 to 70 when you're doing street photography. But sometimes you just got to break out that 70 to 210 to really capture something in the distance. I like how that came out. And that's just another one where I backed off from 210. You see I clipped a little bit of the building. But yeah, I really like how these film pictures were turning out. I wanted to capture the guy with the canoe on top of his car going through downtown Providence. I thought that was kind of interesting. But then also I liked this picture that was a mural on the background. So I went ahead and captured it, kind of a street photo shot with some people in the distance. And again, one last shot of the river area. Now the interesting thing is, you might look at this picture and think, you know, was this film damaged in any way because of the way it came out on the side? But what I want to point out is, if you notice this right here, this is actually, this and this is a reflection. This is a skyscraper right here that was mostly glass. So you really cannot see the detail of the building in itself. You just kind of see the reflection of the clouds, and then some of the darker windows up here. So at first when I looked at this, I thought, oh, did I have some damage on the film? But then I remembered, no, that was a totally glass skyscraper. So again, I'm completely satisfied with how these pictures turn out. I'm really going to have fun shooting film again to capture my memories and not be filling up so many hard drives, actually storing these in boxes. I mean, when you have physical media in your hands, you know, touching it, looking at it, holding it, it's just so much different. and brings it more so to life than looking at pictures on a screen. So yeah, that's my first experience shooting film, and I'm really looking forward to getting back at it. So we'll see you in the next video, and got some more adventures coming out. I'll be shooting some more film with this camera. Like I said, I'm still looking at getting another mirrorless for some different type of work and video work that I'm going to be doing, that I visioned. After shooting this 35mm fully manual camera, I'm thinking about actually picking up a 35mm point and shoot film camera as well. Not sure if I want to go 17mm or what's known as half frame. There's a new Pentax 17 that just came out that I'm going to be researching that looks very interesting as well. And I think probably I'm going to go ahead and maybe pick that up in the future. Right now it's just being released, so it's on back order. Plus it's pretty expensive. I mean, this is the first probably film camera that's been released in the last 20 to 40 years, so it's on back order right now. A little bit expensive. May hold off, or maybe I'll see what I can pick up on eBay. But until then, I'm really gonna like shooting film again. So we'll see you in the next video.